We venture today into the haunted heart of Six Flags Great Adventure, a park known for its towering coasters and wild safaris, but also for tragedy that left scars no roller coaster can erase. Join me as we unravel the fire, the fear, and the lingering spirits of the haunted castle. Welcome to Death Kiss Traveler. I'm your morbidly curious host, Marissa, guiding you through the stories where history meets horror and joy fades into the whispers of the past. From ghostly footsteps on abandoned boardwalks to dark secrets lurking beneath the laughter of amusement parks, we explore the places where life and death are intertwined, and sometimes where the dead refuse to let go. If you are liking this podcast, please give me a 5-star rating or leave a review. It really helps my podcast grow, and I appreciate the support. Let's get into our story. Tucked deep into the barrens of Jackson Township, New Jersey, lies a park that has thrilled and terrified visitors in equal measure for decades. Six Flags Great Adventure. It opened its gates on July 1st, 1974. The creation of Warner Leroy, son of Hollywood legend Mervyn Leroy. Back then, it wasn't the steel and speed thrill capital it is today. It was called the Enchanted Forest, a serene, family-focused escape filled with lush landscaping, gentle rides, and exotic animals. Spread across 800 acres of dense forest, the park felt like something out of a storybook. The trees muffled the noise of the Midway, and the winding paths carried guests past whimsical attractions and into the shaded corners. But change was on the horizon. In 1977, Six Flags purchased the property, and the transformation began. The company kept the charm, but added adrenaline. More thrill rides, larger attractions, and eventually some of the most daring roller coasters in the world. Over the years, themed areas like Fantasy Forest, Frontier Adventures, Adventure Alley, and the Boardwalk offered something for every taste. But it was the rides themselves that would put Great Adventure on the map. King Dakar, the tallest coaster on the planet, at 456 feet tall. El Toro, a wooden giant beloved by coaster enthusiasts around the world. Nitro, Jersey Devil Coaster, and a host of other record breakers kept adrenaline junkies coming back for more. And then there was the park's wild side. Its sprawling safari, one of the largest drive-through wildlife preserves outside of Africa. Now reimagined as the Safari Off-Road Adventure. Long before roller coasters screamed and laughter filled the air, the sprawling acres of what would become Six Flags Great Adventure were part of the vast, mysterious Pine Barrens, a dense forest stretching across southern New Jersey. This land was wild, untamed, and rich with life, home to a diverse ecosystem, and importantly to the native Lenape people. For centuries, the Lenape roamed these woods, hunting, gathering, and living in harmony with nature. The forests, the rivers, and the plains were sacred to them, each grove and clearing woven into a spiritual tapestry of stories, rituals, and respect for the land spirit. But as European settlers expanded, the Lenape were displaced. According to local folklore, many of these land transfers were conducted under dubious circumstances, agreements made without full understanding or consent, trades that disrespected the sacredness of the land. Some tell tales of broken promises, hidden bargains, and spiritual debts left unpaid. The history steeped in sorrow and injustice is said to have left a lingering energy, what some call a curse, resting beneath the park's bright lights and roaring rides. Locals whisper that the spirits of the Lenape, along with the other forces tied to the ancient forest, have never fully departed. These unsettled energies are thought to manifest in a strange phenomena reported around the park. sudden chills, inexplicable unease, and shadows glimpsed where none should be. For those sensitive to the unseen, the land is more than soil and asphalt. It's a threshold between worlds, a place where the past quietly but persistently reaches out. Whether one believes in curses or spirits, the truth remains the park sits on ground layered with deep history and untold stories, a haunting reminder that every place holds a secret, some better left undisturbed. Because behind the laughter, the screams, and the smell of popcorn, Great Adventure has lived with a darker shadow. In 1984, the park became the site of one of the worst amusement park tragedies in U.S. history. That duality still defies Great Adventure today. It's both a flagship jewel of Six Flags Empire, drawing millions with its coasters and animals, and a place forever linked to moments of heartbreak. It stands as a reminder that amusement parks are places of joy and spectacle, but also of responsibility. Six Flags Great Adventure was a place where the air itself seemed to buzz with life. Laughter spilled from roller coaster cues, barkers called out for games of skill, but woven into that tapestry of sound and light was something else, something the park could never shake after May 11th, 1984. The haunted castle stood at the far edge of the park, a looming, black facade dressed with grotesque gargoyles and shadowy windows. Inside, it was a twisting, narrowing labyrinth built from 17 semi-trailers bolted together. 450 feet of dark walls that were padded with polyurethane foam, the ceilings hung with black fabric, and the plywood hallways zigzagged into pitch-dark corners where cheap animatronics and actors in masks lunged from the shadows. Visitors entered by crossing a drawbridge and winding through disorienting corridors that filled with eerie exhibits, coffins, skeletons, spider webs, and with costumed actors like Dracula, Frankenstein, etc. Strobe lighting and unsettling soundscapes enhanced the dread. It was originally introduced in 1978 as a temporary haunted house composed of just 4 trailers. It served as a test attraction, and that version was dismantled after only 1 season and relocated. Due to its popularity, a more expansive version with 17 trailers was erected in 1979. Although it was meant to be seasonal, the attraction's success led to the park to lease it long-term, making it one of the largest single-show attractions the park had ever had. At peak capacity, it welcomed thousands of visitors daily. The haunted castle was designed as 2 parallel rows of 8 semi-trailers arranged like mirror images of each other. Nestled between these rows was a single trailer that served as a control room, a nerve center where the operators managed lights, sounds, and special effects. This trailer also doubled as the changing area for the young actors who brought the monsters and the ghouls to life throughout the maze. During quieter periods, only one side of the attraction was open, but when crowds surged, both sides would operate simultaneously, allowing thousands of visitors to experience the haunting journey. Within the dark maze, 3 or 4 performers lurked in various scenes or roamed freely, startling and terrifying groups as they passed. These haunted house actors were pulled from other parts of the park. By day, they might be clowns or street performers, but once inside, they transformed into vampires, serial killers, and other frightening characters to keep guests on edge. Management had largely overlooked the haunted castle, focusing instead on the major coasters and other headline attractions. But the castle's popularity grew until it became a staple. May 11th, 1984. A warm Friday evening, the sun dipping low and the park still buzzing from the after-school rush. Among the many attractions, the haunted castle stood at the edge of the park, a dark, ominous silhouette against the fading light. Its black painted trailers loomed like forgotten tombstones. It promised shivers and thrills. Ragged banners flapped in the breeze, and the faint sound of ghostly moans and eerie organ music seeped through the cracks. Groups of teens laughed and dared each other to try the castle. Just after 6:30 p.m., a group of 9 teenagers entered the haunted house, excited and full of nervous energy as they entered the haunted castle. As they stepped inside, they were greeted with a near-total darkness of the maze. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of dust and old paint. The sound of their footsteps echoed off the blackened walls, punctuated by the occasional mechanical creak of the animatronics. One teenager flicked open a lighter, just for a moment to see the path ahead. That tiny flicker caught the foam padding, and it ignited like gasoline. The fire didn't crawl, it exploded. The foam surface bubbled and peeled away in seconds, belching thick, oily smoke. Ceiling fabric sagged and burned overhead. The flames raced through the trailers, devouring plywood walls, props, and costumes. Air conditioning fans whirled on, feeding the blaze with oxygen and pushing smoke deeper into the maze. At the time the fire broke out in the haunted castle, there were approximately 29 people inside the attraction. This included visitors and staff. Inside, the world vanished into darkness. The firelights and strobes, once meant for scares, now cast hellish flashes of orange and red. The animatronics twisted in the heat, their plastic faces warping, their voices crackling and dying. Guests screamed, stumbling through the black, smoke-choked corridors. Visibility was zero. Those who escaped found exits by instinct or blind luck. Panic surged as the teenagers tried to find their way out. Screams were swallowed by the dense smoke. The once familiar maze transformed into a nightmare with no escape. Confused and disoriented, some were trapped near locked doors, others lost in the labyrinth of the deadly maze. Those 9 teenagers were cornered at what appeared to be an exit door, but it was actually a locked closet. According to court testimony, they huddled there as thick black smoke filled the maze, tragically misled by confusion and darkness. As the fire broke out inside the haunted castle that evening, the first emergency calls quickly flooded the local fire department. An alarm was sounded at 6:35 p.m. Outside, the joyful sounds of the park faded as alarms finally blared and rescue teams scrambled. But inside, time was running out. Witness and park employee John Turner said,
"I was just outside when the alarm went off. People were running, screaming. It was chaos. Seeing the fire trucks race and knowing that the kids were trapped inside was something no one who was there will ever forget."
Firefighters from Jackson Township and surrounding communities rushed to the scene, arriving within minutes. Upon arrival, crews were met with thick black smoke bellowing from the trailer maze. The dense smoke made visibility nearly impossible. Firefighters had to navigate narrow smoke-filled corridors with limited light and no clear exits. Firefighter Jim Mason of Jackson Township Fire Department said, "When we arrived, the smoke was so thick you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. We had to move in almost blind, calling out to see if anyone was trapped. The heat was unbearable, but our focus was on finding those kids and getting them out." End quote. The first priority was rescue. Teams entered the structure cautiously, calling out for trapped guests while advancing through the labyrinth walkways. Inside, the intense heat and toxic smoke slowed progress. Many rescuers had to rely on memory and maps of the trailer arrangement, but confusion remained high due to the dark, twisting design. Firefighters employed multiple hose lines to attack the fire from different points, working to contain the blaze and prevent it from spreading to nearby attractions and park structures. The use of water streams focused on cooling the trailer's exteriors and flushing the flames from inside when possible. Due to the foam padding and tar paper inside, the fire was highly volatile and fast-moving, requiring sustained hose streams and ventilation efforts to clear the smoke and reduce heat. Crews used fans to push smoke out and improve air quality for rescue teams. Incident Commander Chief William Marr was quoted saying,
"The layout of the haunted castle was a nightmare for rescue operations. Those trailers were all connected like a maze with no clear exit or sun, with no clear exit signs or emergency lighting. It was a race against time in the complete darkness, and the smoke was relentless."
Despite the challenging conditions, fire crews from 11 neighboring towns raced to the scene, battling the flames until the fire was finally declared under control at 7:45 p.m. Strangely, the park stayed open during the chaos, only shutting down a short time later. It wasn't until later that night that the true horror emerged. The charred remains of several teenagers were found inside one of the attraction's trailers, burned beyond recognition. The bodies at first were mistaken for mannequins. Firefighter Susan Ellis said, quote, "We heard the screams, but the smoke swallowed the sound so quickly. It was gut-wrenching to push through those corridors, knowing that lives were on the line, but not being able to see or breathe. It's the worst call I ever responded to," end quote. And paramedic Mark Reynolds said, "When we pulled the survivors out, they were coughing, disoriented, barely able to stand. The others, we knew as soon as we reached them that there was nothing more we could do. That feeling stays with you forever," end quote. Of those 9 teenagers that entered, 8 lost their lives. They could not find their way out. The toxic mix of smoke and carbon monoxide overtook them within minutes. By the time the firefighters ripped open the trailers, it was too late. The 8 that perished in the fire included Joseph R. Beruti Jr., 17, Nicholas C. Cayaza, 17, Jose A. Carrion Jr., 17, Tina M. Genovese, 15, Christopher P. Harrison, 18, Eric Rodriguez, 18, Lennon Ruiz, 16, Samuel Valentin Jr., 17. These 8 teenagers were more than just names on a news report. They were sons and daughters, classmates and friends, each with hopes, dreams, and futures full of promise. Joseph Beruti Jr. was a young man who had just graduated and was celebrating life with a car gifted to him, a symbol of new independence. His friend Nicola Kaiser, who had come to the United States from Italy, was finishing high school with a world full of possibilities ahead. Jose Carrion Jr., Eric Rodriguez, Lennon Ruiz, Samuel Valentin Jr., and Christopher Harrison were all seniors at Franklin K. Lane High School in Brooklyn. Young men preparing to take their next steps into adulthood, whether through further education, work, or military service. And just days from her 16th birthday, Tina Genovese was a bright student rewarded for her hard work with a school trip to the park. Their lives were cut tragically short in a fire that should have never happened. But today, we honor their memory, not as statistics, but as young people who deserve so much more time to laugh, to learn, to love, and to live. May we remember them with respect and carry their story as a solemn reminder that safety must always come first. 8 days after the fire, the Ocean County Prosecutor's Office received a call that would twist the tragedy into something stranger. a 13-year-old boy, shaken by the news reports, pleading for witnesses, told police about a 14-year-old he'd met at the castle's entrance. The boy seemed to know the winding halls too well, as if he'd walked them countless times before. With the strobe lights dead, they moved through the suffocating dark, the older youth lighting their way with a single cigarette lighter. Its flicker revealed foam-padded walls. And then, with a casual brush, the flame caught. The corridor exploded in the fire. The mysterious guide vanished into the chaos, has never been identified. Investigators would later uncover a horrifying truth. This so-called haunted castle was a death trap long before the fire had ever even started. There were no sprinklers, no smoke alarms, no illuminating exit signs to cut through the suffocating darkness. Safety consultants had urged Six Flags for years to install these life-saving systems. Their warnings were ignored. During the trial, the prosecutors brought forward fire prevention consultants who had inspected the haunted castle over the years. These experts testified that despite recommending the installation of sprinklers and smoke alarms during semi-annual inspections for 5 years, none of these vital safety measures were ever implemented when the attraction caught fire. Shift managers also took the stand, revealing grim details. Exit lights weren't working. Many bulbs were missing, and no fire alarms were present, even though patrons often carried matches and cigarette lighters throughout the pitch-dark corridors. They shared how their repeated requests for safety upgrades were dismissed by management as too costly. Additionally, they described a torn crash pad in the hallway that exposed flammable foam rubber padding, turning the castle into a deadly tinder box. The problem was the haunted castle wasn't even treated as a permanent building. It was cobbled together from those 17 semi-trailers, linked by plywood hallways, yet the township and Six Flags classified it as temporary. That loophole meant that no building permits, no occupancy certificate, no fire inspections, nothing to enforce even the most basic safety rules. Fire prevention experts inspected the castle regularly and begged for changes. Management dismissed the recommendations, citing cost concerns. The castle was profitable, and safety upgrades in their eyes were just expensive inconveniences. The fire was over. The ashes were cold, but in the core room, the heat was only beginning to rise. The state of New Jersey wasn't about to let this tragedy pass quietly. Prosecutors came out swinging, charging Six Flags, its corporate parent, and 2 top executives with aggravated manslaughter. The accusation was explosive. Greed and negligence had paved the path to the haunted castle fire, and 8 teenagers had to pay the price with their lives. The prosecutor's narrative was chilling. They painted Six Flags as a company that knew the haunted castle was a fire trap. No sprinklers, no alarms, no working exit signs, and yet chose to keep it open day after day to keep the money flowing. This wasn't just carelessness, the state argued. This was a conscious gamble with human lives. But the defense countered with a sharp pivot. The real failure, they claimed, lay with the local authorities, the township inspectors, who had waved the haunted castle through as a temporary structure, never forcing a full safety inspection, never demanding compliance with fire codes. If anyone was negligent, it was the regulators who failed to enforce their own rules. During the subsequent criminal trial, the Jackson Township fire inspector testified that he had never inspected the castle. The castle lacked a building permit, a certificate of occupancy, fire and smoke detectors, and sprinklers despite its repeated recommendations by the park's own safety consultants. The trial itself became a spectacle. Jurors heard how visitors routinely carried lighters to see their way through the darkness. Yet no one in management thought that might be a fire risk worth addressing. Family members of the victims sat in the gallery, their presence a silent, constant reminder of the stakes. The defendants denied any culpability. They contended that the fire was arson and that no amount of precautions would have saved their lives. In New Jersey history, it had never happened before. A corporation hauled into court, accused of conduct so reckless it had cost lives. The boy that came forward early in the investigation took the stand during the trial, repeating his chilling account to the prosecution. He testified that he'd seen another boy, about his same age, but a stranger to him, accidentally ignite the fire by flicking a cigarette lighter too close to a foam-covered wall. However, news reports from the trial revealed that no such boy was ever identified, and no other witnesses supported the claim. When pressed by the defense during cross-examination, the boy firmly denied having started the fire himself. I have yet to share my opinion on any of these stories, but I'm going to with this one. I fully believe that the boy that came forward was the arsonist, trying to place blame on a mysterious 14-year-old friend that nobody could find, he'd never seen him before, and disappears. I'd like to know what your opinion is on it. Whether it was on purpose or on accident, I just don't think that there was another young man that had started the fire and disappeared. Park officials testified that smoke alarms had once been installed in the haunted castle, but due to repeated vandalism, they stopped replacing them after 1979. One official explained that assigning an employee to patrol the attraction continuously was considered a better alternative than relying on smoke alarms. Seems like a great idea, huh? During the trial, a senior fire safety expert called by the defense argued that while sprinklers and smoke detectors might have limited property damage, they would not have saved the lives. He claimed that by the time the fire spread, deadly combustion gases would have already filled the building, suffocating anyone inside. However, this testimony was later criticized by other fire safety professionals for potentially hindering progress on sprinkler legislation aimed at preventing future tragedies. And then came the twist no one saw coming. After weeks of testimony, the jury, faced with two powerful but opposing narratives, returned their verdict. Not guilty. The courtroom was stunned. For the families, it was salt in the wound that had barely begun to heal. For Six Flags, it was a corporate exoneration, at least in the legal sense. After an intense 8-week trial and 13 hours of careful deliberation, both companies were found not guilty of aggravated manslaughter. In interviews following the trial, opinions among the jurors revealed the complexity of the case. The jury foreman openly criticized Jackson Township officials, accusing them of repeatedly allowing the haunted castle to operate while exploiting gaps and loopholes in the local fire safety codes. According to him, this regulatory failure played a major role in the tragedy. However, another juror offered a contrasting perspective, firmly defending the township officials by stating they were not negligent or derelict in their duties. Both jurors ultimately agreed that the companies could not be held responsible because they had relied on information from local authorities, specifically that no permits or sprinkler systems were required for the temporary structure. The division among the jurors highlighted a tangled web of responsibility, where blame was diffused between corporate management and municipal oversight, and the legal fallout was far from over. The criminal trial might have ended in acquittals, but the executives who ran the park still faced their own reckoning. Two of them, charged separately, managed to avoid prison altogether by entering a pre-trial intervention program, an arrangement that required them to complete community service in exchange for having their charges dropped. For many grieving families, it felt like a hollow form of justice. And then came the civil lawsuits. The families of the victims sought not just accountability, but recognition of the human cost that night. 7 families reached confidential settlements, reportedly around $2.5 million each, with Six Flags and its insurers. But one family refused to settle quietly. They took their case all the way to trial, laying bare the harrowing details in front of the jury. In the end, they were awarded $750,000, a sum far less than the settlements, but one that came with something money couldn't buy, a public verdict acknowledging the park's role in the tragedy. The courtroom battles marked a grim epilogue to a disaster that for some would never truly end. The tragedy didn't just shake Six Flags. It shook an entire nation. As news of the haunted castle fire spread, so did the waves of public outrage. Families mourned, communities rallied, and safety advocates demanded change. The burning question on everyone's lips was simple but damning. How could this have happened? How could a place meant for fun and thrills be so dangerous and unprotected? Pressure mounted on lawmakers and safety organizations to act, because this wasn't just a Six Flags problem. Across the country, haunted houses, fun houses, and other special amusement buildings were operating under patchwork rules, many without the basic safeguards to keep people safe in an emergency. In response, the National Fire Protection Association, the NFPA, stepped in decisively. The organization took a comprehensive rewrite of its life safety code, the gold standard for fire safety regulations. The new rules were clear and uncompromising. Sprinkler systems became mandatory in all haunted attractions, regardless of size or location. Smoke detectors and fire alarms had to be installed and maintained properly. Exit signs had to be illuminated and clearly visible, ensuring even in smoke-filled darkness, patrons could find their way out. Regular fire drills and safety inspections became the norm. These reforms echoed across the amusement and haunted attraction industries, transforming safety standards overnight. The NFPA's response ensured that no other haunted house would ever again fall through the cracks of regulation like the haunted castle had. But the legacy of that night in 1984 lives on, not just in improved laws, but in the collective memory of an industry forever changed by loss and the urgent need to protect the innocent. The haunted castle was gone, its twisted remains reduced to nothing, a blackened scar on the asphalt. Where laughter and screams once echoed, now there was an eerie stillness, a silence that seemed to hum with memories of that fateful night. The aftermath of the haunted castle fire sent shockwaves far beyond the tragedy itself, deeply impacting the Six Flags Great Adventure reputation and bottom line. Attendance at the park plunged sharply for the remainder of that year, dropping to nearly 15% below the previous year's figure of 3.3 million visitors. The fire had shattered public confidence. Families who once flocked to the park for thrills and fun hesitated to return, haunted by the memory of the disaster. In response, park officials launched a massive safety overhaul, investing $5.2 million in installing state-of-the-art sprinkler systems and computerized smoke and heat detectors across the park. These upgrades were heavily promoted as a reassurance that safety was now a top priority. By the following year, Six Flags reported that attendance levels had returned to pre-fire numbers, suggesting that the public's trust was slowly being rebuilt. But behind the optimistic reports, industry insiders revealed a more fragile truth. The park struggled with poor attendance for years afterward, and rumors circulated that the financial strain brought on by the fire's fallout nearly forced Six Flags Great Adventure to close its doors in 1987. It was a close call, one that underscored how a single tragedy could almost topple one of the nation's largest amusement parks. For years after the fire, park employees whispered about the strange sensations near the site. The uneasy quiet that settled after dark felt heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. On warm summer evenings, some would swear they felt sudden cold spots. And every so often, when the breeze shifted just right, the faint but unmistakable scent of smoke would drift through the midway, like a ghostly reminder that the past was never truly gone. In the immediate aftermath, Six Flags chose not to rebuild the haunted castle. Instead, that corner of the park was cleared, left open and empty for some time, a visual mark of respect and caution. Eventually, the space was repurposed and absorbed into the ever-expanding footprint of the park's newer attractions. But for those who know the story, that area remains a somber reminder of tragedy. Today, haunted attractions are safer. Their hallways lit with emergency signs and protected by sprinklers, silent guardians born from hard-earned lessons. Six Flags Great Adventure isn't just a place of laughter and thrills. It's a land marked by tragedy, where joy and sorrow have collided in devastating ways. The haunted castle was only the beginning. The exact number of deaths at Six Flags Great Adventure over its history isn't officially published in one place, but based on public records, news reports, and safety databases, I found at least a dozen people have died at or directly related to the park since it opened in 1974. Here are several other deaths that I found in my research. In 1993, a ride operator lost his life on the Rolling Thunder coaster. Fast forward to 1995, when an adult guest suffered a fatal heart attack on the Batman ride. In one, a visitor drowned near the Safari off-road adventure, slipping into a restricted water area where safety barriers fell short. In 2013, a sudden lightning storm claimed the life of a park visitor. And in 2017, the park lost a maintenance worker due to a fatal electrocution. These incidents, scattered over decades, weave a darker thread through the park's history. A pattern some whisper is more than coincidence. What do you think? Let me know on TikTok or Instagram at Death Kiss Traveler Podcast. I want to hear your opinions on this. There are reasons we have strict safety measures, often due to the loss of life. This season, as you chase the next scare or ride the tallest coaster, pause for a moment and honor the unseen echoes of those who never left the park alive. Their stories demand we remember to respect the fine line between fun and fate. Thank you for listening to Death Kiss Traveler. This podcast is produced by Sun-Kissed Traveler. Need help planning your next vacation? Check show notes for details or visit sun-kissedtraveler.com.